Hi, my name is Jamie Utt, and I am a sexual violence prevention educator. And in my work to engage men to try to address the problems of sexual violence, I often come up against this sort of resistance or this pushback against a simple idea that I think it's really important for us as men to understand. And that concept that I get pushback about is male privilege. And knowing that this pushback makes it difficult for us to have meaningful engagement to try to address some of the problems that we as men need to be addressing in our communities, I thought I would just take a minute and try to explain this concept of male privilege in ways that are hopefully accessible to my fellow men. So let me just start by defining that concept of male privilege. Male privilege describes any benefits, advantages, or assets men receive in our society because of our gender identity. Let me say that one more time. Male privilege describes any benefits, advantages, or assets that we as men receive because of our gender identity. Now, a lot of times those assets or those legs up or those benefits that we receive are unearned. They're not things that we have earned or made for ourselves. Rather, they're things that simply come by the nature of our identity. For example, by and large, research finds that men are more likely to be promoted, to receive wages, to have higher salaries as our similarly situated female colleagues. Why? Because generally our society rewards and privileges certain ways of asserting oneself, certain ways of being or acting in the workplace that reflect how men are socialized to be men, as opposed to how women are socialized, or how people who don't fit into the gender binary might assert themselves. So, for example, men are socialized from a very early age that what leadership means is to take charge, to be the person who's asserting and taking charge, whereas women are often socialized to see leadership as something that's more collaborative. Now, what's interesting about this is that while men might be rewarded for that take charge leadership style, research indicates that collaborative leadership is actually far more effective at realizing positive growth in our organizations, and yet women are often not seen as leaders because they don't have those same take charge sort of leadership styles in the way that they work in their environments. Another example might relate to things like sex and sexuality, where men are at least allowed to be sexually adventurous or exploratory or promiscuous, if not actively rewarded for it. Let's be frank, we know that especially in all-male environments, men can often be rewarded for sexual conquest, while women are shamed for the exact same behavior and called some really terrible names. More than anything, male privilege simply means that we as men don't really have to think a ton about how our gender might be helping or hurting us in the world. Privilege is a lot like having the wind at our back rather than the wind in our face. This doesn't mean that we don't still have struggles or that things are simply easy and everything is handed to us just because we're men. That's not what it's saying at all. Instead, it just means that if we imagine that we're walking up an incredibly steep hill and that women and gender non-conforming people are walking up that exact same hill, that they somehow have the wind in their face, making it harder for them to walk up that hill while we have the wind at our backs. That doesn't mean that we don't have to struggle. It just means that we have the advantage of having privilege pushing us ahead in certain ways. But why does male privilege exist? Well, think about who set up all of the systems in this country, from government, education, to law enforcement, to our economic systems. When the United States was founded, the only group that was considered full citizens were white men who owned land. And it's really only been 50 years that everyone technically has had the full legal rights of citizenship in this country. And not enough has changed, frankly, to ensure that those who are left out of our systems for hundreds of years can catch up. Which is why it's really important for men not only to be aware of the ways in which we might receive privilege in our society, but for us to actively work to change our environments to make them more equitable. Just as we would hope that white people would act to address racism or racial privilege, or that we would hope that people without disabilities would work to make our environments equitable for people with disabilities and work alongside people with disabilities to make that a reality, we need men to do the same when it comes to gender inequity and male privilege. In a lot of ways, we need to simply listen. We need to listen to women and people who don't fit into the gender binary, who are telling us about our privileges. And then we need to follow their lead and take action in working to make our environments more equitable and environments that everyone, frankly, can succeed, and where male privilege is not a barrier to actually creating the kinds of environments we would like to see. I hope that's been helpful. And if you ever have any questions, you can always hit me up on social media, and I'd love to talk more about it. Thanks so much. Have a good day.